What can I do now? How can I empower myself now? How can I break free of any connection to a negative connection or a hook in me, which makes me feel bad today? How can I break free of my insecurity? How can I break free of negativity? How can I shine in my life as an example of somebody who has had victory over the things which used to dominate? Presenting yourself today as a loving, connected, compassionate, awake and aware human being that is humble enough to say, I've done some things well and I've made some mistakes along the way, just like everybody else. To present yourself to your children as somebody that works on their challenges is presenting one of the greatest gifts you could ever give your children. I want to say welcome and thank you. Whenever any one of us asks a question, it allows everybody in the circle, which is a very wide circle throughout this world, to contemplate based upon their own experience how that question that you've brought to bear helps them to move forward, how it relates to their life. And so there are no bad questions. There are only great inquiries. And we all get to look at this, the myriad puzzle pieces of being a human being. And In the Circle is really, really basically about that. Tracy, I want to welcome you to In the Circle. I'm so delighted to have you here. And I appreciate you being willing to come and ask a question today. So Tracy, I want to invite you to bring your inquiry into the circle today. Tell me what's on your heart, what's on your mind.
Okay, thank you. I guess originally what was on my heart was that I quit drinking alcohol about 4 years ago, but didn't practice any sort of recovery per se. My dad is a recovering alcoholic of about 35 years, so I'm familiar with AA rooms, or one in particular, I should say. And I've had problems with depression and anxiety for the last 30 years, on and off. I assumed that quitting drinking would make those problems go away, and they didn't. And last September, I was just feeling really low and not sure where to turn. So I started attending ACA meetings, Adult Children of Alcoholics meetings. And that's been super beneficial to me. It has allowed me a place to speak very freely, which I haven't really had a chance in my life, or felt that I had a chance. I don't know if I did, but I felt that I didn't. And it's been very beneficial. But as I do this work, I see how ingrained all of these traits of this adult child of an alcoholic is, and that most of the time it's unconscious until I've gone through it and can reflect back upon it. My children are older now. My youngest is 17, so my work with them is almost complete. Not that it's ever complete, but I guess my inquiry is these ingrained behaviors that I'm trying to change and dismantle. And it just seems very long and tedious and hard, and like there's no end in sight. Like I know this is going to be a lifelong process for me to untangle all of this stuff. I guess I wonder, is it going to do, not that I'm only doing this for my kids, because I'm not, I'm doing this for my own peace of mind, but there's a lot of guilt from being a parent that had behaviors that weren't a very good model for my kids. And now they're adults and I see these behaviors in them. So I guess, does it ever end? I mean, is there light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak?
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. You brought up so many important things, and I'd like to address each of them bit by bit and little by little. If the first thing that you brought up in your inquiry today, which is so important, is this idea that by letting go of drugs and alcohol, our underlying issues will be resolved. So many people have that misunderstanding, myself included, at the time when I got sober. That we have this sense that drugs and alcohol, or whatever the addictive behavior was, that's our problem. And the reason we feel that way is because actually it's become our problem. It wasn't our problem when we began. When we began using drugs and alcohol or acting out in other addictive ways, we had another problem or other problems. And as we went down the road of using drugs and alcohol or deepening our connection to an addictive behavior, that became problematic in our life. It became so much of a problem in our life that we then lived in the misunderstanding that if we could just remove that problem from our life, all of our other problems would resolve themselves. We had forgotten that the reason we picked up drugs and alcohol in the first place, and the reason we stuck with it, is because it was a chosen solution to the problems that we had been experiencing up to that point. Drugs and alcohol for me were a solution, an attempt at a solution to an underlying sense of, for me, anxiety or depression, at times anger or emotions that I didn't know how to deal with. And when I smoked pot or drank or used psychedelics or did whatever the drugs were, I got to feel something different. I got to have access to something else when I didn't seem to be able to access anything else without drugs and alcohol at that time. So this for me was a solution. Now I can speak clearly about it in retrospect as I'm speaking to you now, but at the time I didn't understand that. So what happens? We eventually, I needed to get sober. I needed to get sober because the solution that I had chosen to solve my problems had turned against me. It had become such a big problem that I now was in the same misunderstanding that you expressed at that moment when you got sober, and you now have come to a greater understanding in your recovery that just letting go of drugs and alcohol wasn't going to solve the problems of life at all. What it was going to do would be to put you in a position to be able to do the necessary work to actually solve the core issues of your life and to set yourself free. So the very first thing that I want to bring to everyone's consideration in the circle is that because we have engaged in an addictive behavior and it's become painful for us and it has become a problem for us, and maybe we recognize that, the reason we put down the behavior is because it's a problem in our life, but it's not the problem. It's become a problem, and now we have to put down that to move beyond that problem to get to the core problems, to get to the causes and conditions of our addiction in the first place. So in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it speaks about this, and it says, we had to get down to causes and conditions, that our alcoholism was but a symptom of something else. And so congratulations to you and to all of us for moving beyond that misunderstanding, that if we just let go of drugs and alcohol or the addictive behavior, that everything in life is going to show up roses. In fact, we found out that that wasn't going to be the case at all. And so now we move into this newfound position of recovery. Beautiful. Now we're in recovery and we start to learn. We start to experience life, and we start to see our patterns in a way that we haven't been able to see them before. You spoke about bringing your patterns, these behaviors up to the conscious level of becoming aware of these behaviors. What we know about subconscious patterns is that they are subconscious, meaning we can't see them. They are our blind spots until they're not. This is very, very important for us to understand as parents, guides, mentors, people who would seek to be an example of ethics and morals, and people who would like to guide others in a positive and beautiful way. And your inquiry is bringing up this question of how can I forgive myself for not being more aware, more awake, more advanced, more connected, more mature, more spiritually enlightened than I was before. And the answer to this question is all you could ever be is who you are in this level of consciousness right now. When your children were growing up, you did precisely the best that you could do, given the inputs, given your teachers, given your learnings, given your training to that point. You were trained to be how you are by your parents, your peer group, your teachers, your life experience, all the food that you've eaten, all the things that you've watched, all the media that you've consumed, all the books that you've read, all the conversations that you ever had. And the internal dialogue at whatever level of consciousness it was taking place, all of those things together have brought you to a place of understanding and compassion and love today. You look back from this place of awakening and you say, wow, I'm so disappointed in myself, or why couldn't I have been more awake before? Why couldn't I have done a better job as a parent? There is no parent that has ever existed in the history of mankind, humankind, that hasn't asked that question. Why didn't I do better? There's no parent that doesn't worry about the negative things that they've passed on to their kids. And every single parent, the directive is, look at what you have done. Look at what you have done. You raised children. You loved them to the best of your ability. And now you can sit in this place where you are on this beautiful path of recovery and you can say, well, I could have done even better. No. No. If you could have, you would have. You did the absolute best you could do. Here's the good news. Anybody who says, I could have done better, what they really mean to say is, I can now do better. I am now in a more aware, more connected, more awake place, conscious place than I was before. How do we know that? Because you couldn't ask this question if you weren't. You couldn't have these concerns if you hadn't had an awakening. That's the beautiful good news. Now you look at your children through the light of insecurity, through the light of this inquiry of, oh, I could have done better, I should have done better, I would have done better. You look at your children's behavior, and what aspect of your children's behavior are you going to notice when you're looking from a place of insecurity? You will notice the aspects of their behavior that you determine are passed on by you and they're not the positive ones. And so the lenses through which you observe your children's life and behavior are skewed by the feeling of insecurity about the things you didn't do as a parent or what you think negatively you passed on to your kids. Let's look at your children's lives through a different set of lenses now. Let's change the lenses and look at what your kids are. Look at how loving and considerate they are. Do they have work to do? Of course they do. They're human beings. Do you think if you were this perfect parent that you imagine you could have been or should have been, that they now would have no issues and they would now have to, they'd just be enlightened kids? Doesn't work that way. Very complex world, very complex beings, very complex relationships. And the problem is that we can't see the full picture. We can't see the full picture. So what we see, we only see through the lens of how we're feeling on that day. If on a particular day, you're not feeling particularly good about yourself, you look at your children's behavior, maybe they're having a challenge, you might say, they're having that challenge and it's my fault. They're thinking a certain way and it's my fault. They're having an experience in this life and it's my fault. If I had been different, they would now be having a different experience. I can assure you that that isn't true. I can assure you that there's an unfolding taking place. And your prayer as a mother, which is a prayer of love, that your children have fruitful and amazing and loving and wonderful lives, is the thing that has continued. You have that prayer now, of course, because you're asking this question. You had that prayer then as well. There was never a moment in your life when you didn't love these children. And it's so easy for us to look at the things we haven't done, or to view the behaviors of another, even our child, through the lens of our own insecurity. So now what we do in especially ACA work, adult children of alcoholics, is we're starting to realize that these patterns are not here by accident. We were trained into these patterns. And now, seeing that, we have empowerment. There's something we can do about it. We empower ourselves to change our patterns. And we also remove guilt and shame from the situation. We can say, okay, there are ways I behaved as a parent that could have been improved upon, but I did the best that I could. What can I do now? How can I empower myself now? How can I break free of any connection to a negative connection or a hook in me, which makes me feel bad today? How can I break free of my insecurity? How can I break free of negativity? How can I shine in my life as an example of somebody who has had victory over the things which used to dominate? Presenting yourself today as a loving, connected, compassionate, awake and aware human being that is humble enough to say, I've done some things well and I've made some mistakes along the way, just like everybody else. To present yourself to your children as somebody that works on their challenges is presenting one of the greatest gifts you could ever give your children. And I want to reframe something that you said in your inquiry. You said, my job's almost over because my youngest child is 17 years old. It is possible that you could say that one stage of your job as a parent is over, but I can assure you another stage is beginning. And the influence that you have on your children continues as their influence back on you also continues. And so this is not a one-way loop. Maybe when you have small children and you're caring for them and they need you to care for them, that's one thing. These are now young adults. And your ability to overcome your challenges from this point forward are going to be very, very compelling for these kids. And I'll tell you a personal story on this note. I really struggled in my relationship with my mom. I've spoken about it. I've written about it. We really struggled together. We had a hard time. We loved each other, and we really struggled in our relationship. Our communication was so off. I was remarking the other day that she never got to know me. She died so young. I was 24 when she left. And that she never got to know me as an adult And what I mean by that is that she never got to know me when I had grown up and when I could be beyond a painful connection with her. So my relationship with her towards the end had become very much about our problems. We were so stuck in our problems and we never got to just be together and enjoy life together is what I was saying, you know? But I want to tell you that even in all the challenge and in all the difficulty, two main teachings came to light for me about my mom and how her life ended, or where she was in her life when it ended. Number one, my mother had gotten sober and she was attending a 12-step fellowship called Families Anonymous, which is a 12-step fellowship that's particularly popular in New York City. And it's kind of like Al-Anon, and it's just an offshoot of that, but it's about the family. And my mom never missed those meetings. She had a home group. She went every week. She went every single week until the day she passed away. Her life was changing. Her awareness was changing. Her effort to connect with herself, I now see as an adult male, I now look back and say, wow, my mom was making an incredible effort, even though at the time I couldn't have said that because I was so caught in the challenges of our relationship. My mom was on the ascent in her life. And it's sad, of course, that her life needed to end, and who can ever understand these things and the mystery of that. But she was on the ascent. Her example as an adult woman, for me, will far outweigh what I remember as her example when I was a child. Seeing how she handled her life and the challenges of her life as an adult woman in recovery inspired my recovery, changed my life forever. I'll never be able to express how much her example means to me today. When I remember her, I'm thinking of those things. And I'm thinking of the lessons that she taught me in her example that I couldn't accept at the time or hear at the time, that later on in the decades to follow would become very significant for me in my understanding of myself and the world and the people around me. So don't underestimate the power of your example now and your unfolding relationship with these children. Yes, and it's a changing landscape. You're not supposed to be to your children in their 20s what you were and what they were to you in their teens or in their childhood. Yes, it's a changing landscape. They are becoming adults. There's an individuation, of course, which is naturally taking place, and you as a parent actually want that. You want that for them. But your unfolding relationship with yourself is critically influential for these young adults moving forward. And so I would ask you to release the guilt of the past or any shame associated with that, and to move into the solution, which is continuing your development in your work and standing as the greatest example you possibly can of what it is to be a person who overcomes their challenges one day at a time. Set that example for your kids, and I assure you it's going to sink in deep, and it will be meaningful for them for decades to come, for the rest of their life. So these are the things that come up for me in this inquiry. I want to tell you that this inquiry is so important for parents, and you can't not influence your children. And you can't only influence your children with the most positive aspects of your character. It doesn't work that way. Every parent ever is influential upon their children in positive and challenging ways. And it is not fair for you. It is not fair for you to judge yourself on the aspect of your children's behaviors that you think are challenges for them. Because also we have to remember that we don't walk in their shoes and we don't know what their destiny is. We don't control that as parents. These children are on loan to us. And so we guide them to the best of our ability. And then, there's a certain amount of letting go that has to take place. And that's very painful for all parents as they step into that next stage of parenthood where, okay, not only are my kids not listening to me, but I think I know, how they ought to be behaving, in their life. And it's like, yeah, we do really well to stay out of that business, meaning their business. So balance out the observations. Look at your children through the lens of equanimity. They're alive on the planet Earth. They have their challenges. They have their joys. They have their strengths. They have their liabilities. Just like you, just like me, just like everybody. Your responsibility now is to continue to do the work of your life. To learn and to grow, to live and to love. And we stay out of other people's business, but we stand as an example of victory and we become supremely attractive to great circumstances. And it's the greatest thing when your children can come to you someday and say, wow, you really seem to be doing great. Wow. Because without recovery, it's very easy to become a burden to our children. With recovery, we get to step into the present moment and we get to be human, meaning imperfect. We're going to make mistakes. And we get to just be in the prayer of love, be in the prayer of connection, be in the prayer that only a mother can make. And we're talking about the end of guilt, the end of shame, even the end of loneliness, coming into our full power. And so this inquiry leads a person to their full power. That's how powerful this inquiry that you made is. So thank you. I'd like to ask if you have some comments or thoughts that have come up as you've heard this exploration that you and I have been through here, and what comes up for you.
What you said about without recovery, we become a burden. That really struck a nerve because I have that relationship with my mother who is not in recovery. My dad was the alcoholic, but she's very codependent. She lives her life for her kids and her grandkids. And I am struggling with my relationship with her. And I have been fighting against that in the last 4 years. That I don't want it. I don't want my relationship with my children to end up, I don't want them to end up feeling the same way I do about conversations with her, avoiding her, not feeling like we're truly connected. So that really, what you said about the recovery without recovery. So if I had thought this wasn't working before, I know it's working, and it gives me a lot of hope.
Beautiful. With regards to our parents, now flipping the script, now we're adults, and in your relationship with your mom, now this is the opportunity for understanding. This is the opportunity for forgiveness. This is the opportunity for acceptance. Hardest thing. And you can also teach your children these same lessons as you upgrade, deepen your approach, your strategic approach to your mom. So they're witnessing that as well. And so it's a very powerful thing to keep trying to connect with your mom in ways that you can. You find an in. Somehow you find an in. And we have to do everything we can to have compassion and to try to accept our parents as they are, especially as they're getting much older and preparing to step into the next plane, you know. So I want to thank you for your inquiry today. I'm so grateful. And as I said, it's one of those inquiries that just leads to the greatest places. Very powerful. So thank you so much. And so much love to you, Tracy.